This is the sketchbook I almost didn't finish. It's the Strathmore mixed media sketchbook in A4, which was recommended by so many artists on YouTube. But for me, it was a struggle from day one. I don't know, the pages felt a bit thin and the texture was a bit off. And there were so many times where I just wanted to give up on it, but I didn't. I came back, I filled it up, and now it's finally filled. So let's go through the journey of how I learned to love, or at least filled the sketchbook. Welcome to the sketchbook tour. This one really stayed with me for a long time. I almost always start a new sketchbook with a pencil portrait just because it's the most fun for me. So that's also how this one begins. And here you can still see my older illustration style. My shading used to be a bit rougher, and over time it became more minimal. I also drew a lot of these kinds of flowers back then. You'll see them again on the next page. But these are painted in gouache and added colored pencils on top. Same with this one here. And this one is made with watercolor. Since I started painting with gouache, I always use the Schminke gouache. Sometimes I mix my tiny Winsor Newton gouache in it. So I don't have much to say about this spread. This is still in the old style, and honestly I don't remember what the plan was for these little drawings up here. So here I tried oil pastels, which I actually ended up selling. I can't remember the brand, but I do remember that they were very oily and messy. But whenever I use something really smudgy like this, I like to add this thin kind of wrapping paper so the pages don't get dirty. And these two drawings here, my sister actually made them, and I just added them into the sketchbook. Then some gouache color swatches, and I don't really remember what the plan for these two were. And on the right side, this was actually a commission. A client who had a small bee farm asked me to paint 3 illustrations of local flowers for this, for his space. So here I started sketching different flowers to see which one would work best in my style. And in the end, I chose to paint the white sage flower, and here on the right you can see the color palette I tested for this. These are the final sketches for that painting. I first drew them on regular paper and then traced them onto nicer watercolor paper using a light pad. And for this plant here I added an extra flower later on. This one here was also part of that same commission, and these here too. Some random pencil sketches, and for basically all my pencil work I used the Pentel Graph Gear 1000. It's my favorite pencil of all time. I use it almost every day. And after I sold my first oil pastels, I decided to invest a bit more and got the Caran d'Ache Neo pastels. They are quite expensive, so I only bought 3 colors. But as you can see, I can mix them really well, so you still get a good range of colors. And yeah, on the right side, I painted this sketch using gouache. Here's a watercolor portrait. I think I used the Winsor and Newton Cotman set for this one. I also swatched them here. And at the bottom, I remember I had just bought some colored Micron fine liners. So I tested how they look combined with watercolor. And this is a full spread with watercolor illustrations. My go-to watercolors are usually Schminke. I buy them individually and put them into a metal palette. So it's basically an empty watercolor tin from my local art store. And yeah, this one is from Bösner. Then some more watercolor swatches, and on the right here, I really like these two little worms. This shoe sketch I later scanned in and colored it digitally. And at that time I had a phase where I drew a lot of shoes. This is a watercolor illustration. And here on the right side, the idea was to put random watercolor textures first and later draw little close-up pencil illustrations of random things and then just paint over the gaps in white again. But as you can see, I never finished it. Here I first used my colored micron fine liners as the base drawing, and then I tried out a new technique where I first would paint in the shadow areas with ink, and then I added watercolor on top, and I really like how colorful and bright the colors turned out. This one here was an idea for a bigger illustration, but I never made that. And from time to time, I like to practice specific parts of the face, like the eyes here in watercolor. This whole portrait was done with ink. I used the drawing ink from Aurora and Klinger, and I also have it in orange. I really like this brand. And here another example of my shoe obsession phase. I really wanted these Converse Run Stop Motion shoes, but I couldn't find them in any colors I liked, so I just painted it in my own version. Here I took an online course in figure drawing, and they gave you the homework to draw lots and lots of these little figures, first as a silhouette, and then you had to construct the body with this kind of method. Some more random sketches and watercolor paintings. This one here was a digital drawing I made in Procreate. Then I printed it on watercolor paper and put it in here. And I really like my pencil drawings a lot more. So I really like how this fish turned out. The big fish is painted with gouache. I do like the colors, but not so much the style. I definitely prefer my pencil drawings, so that's why I like this fish on the left. The night before I drew these, I watched Nosferatu in the cinema, and I remember being really inspired. I even had the idea to create an illustrated movie poster, but I never actually made it. And on the right, this is gouache, and the tomatoes are done with acrylics. Right now I'm trying to build a nice acrylic palette. I mostly use acrylics from Schminke or Winsor & Newton. From this point on, I really decided to finish the sketchbook. At that time, it had already been sitting on my shelf untouched for, I think, about a year. I actually made a whole video about the process of finishing it with all the ups and downs, so I will link that below and you can also click on it at the end of this video. So like always, I started with pencil portraits. For this page, I first painted these rectangles with watercolor, let everything dry, and then added a pencil portrait into each one. And yeah, I know, this one I left empty. And on the left page, I started with random colors, then drew on top of it with colored pencils, and finally painted around everything with white gouache. So here I used a similar approach. I like to put down some watercolor first, so the page isn't just plain white. Then I draw on top of it, and Here I added some white details with a Posca pen. And for the skull I used a Koh-i-Noor colored pencil. I actually bought this set in Prague, but you can also find it online. I don't have to say much about this one. I used colored pencils here and watercolor here, and I also tried adding the white Posca pen into the pencil texture, but I think I prefer how it looks on top of watercolor, like the previous spread. The base here is gouache, then I painted the rabbit on top of it, also in gouache, and the details are made with my colored pencils. And on the right side I drew this flower with my red Sharpie gel pen. I really like this spread. I'm always the happiest when I can just draw portraits. But at the same time, I feel like a sketchbook full of only pencil portraits gets a bit boring. So I try to remind myself to also practice watercolor and gouache. Here I used acrylics in a different style, but honestly, I do not like it. This spread actually started at the Kunsthistorisches Museum here in Vienna, and I finished this one later at home, and the rest of the elements are all done in watercolor. This one here was another piece inspired by a painting I saw at the Kunsthistorisches Museum. I really wanted to just draw it in my own style, which I did here. And on the left there are some more pencil portraits and a little chili. These here are all done with my colored micron pens. I used blue, green, red and black. And finally a colorful gouache landscape. I don't really enjoy painting landscapes, to be honest, but I just wanted to do something colorful, so this is what I ended up with. And lastly, my current business card, the back cover and the front. And this is the whole sketchbook. It took me almost 4 years to finish it, which is kind of crazy to say out loud, but I'm really glad I didn't give up on it. If you want to see the full process of how I finally finished it, you can check out the video here. And thank you for watching.